your heart knows. Your heart knows what you need. Your heart knows what is right. And your heart will guide you properly. I promise you. The heart is the center of knowing. And the psychedelics are one modality. It's not the only modality. And it's not the end all be all. It's a finger pointing at the moon, but it's a potent, powerful finger. And so we should attend to it with our best mind and put our best people on it, because it can really help us navigate this time. And fundamentally, we are going to be okay. And can we all hold that faith together and then make that happen through our actions in the world? That's what I have to say.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. We have Keith Gilmore in the house. Welcome, Keith. So good to have you.
Thank you, Susan. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Likewise. And I would just kind of share a few sentences of your bio. And as always, we would add the full bio and your links and all the information in the show notes. So for now, you are a president of Portland Psychedelic Society. So this is really great. I've got my own personal questions to ask, actually, Keith, but we'll get there. So you're a writer, speaker, and a coach. You write essays and give talks on matters of psycho-spiritual development and cultural amelioration. And you are the founder of Texture Coaching and Integration, a coaching platform in service to individuation and psychedelic integration. So let's begin with what brings you to this work?
I came to the psychedelic work, I think, first by just kind of happenstance, and found my way to taking some mushrooms with friends in kind of my early middle 20s, and going out in nature and enjoying the giggles and watching the trees breathe, and this classic story. And as I continued on my own path, feeling kind of meandering through life, I found kind of the deeper connection through psychedelics, and trying the approach from Terence McKenna of taking high doses of mushrooms in silent darkness, and that kind of opening up a whole other worldview for me and helping me to see myself more clearly. And from there, it just became utilizing the psychedelics on a regular, though not extremely frequent basis, to keep myself in alignment. But the whole process really helped me understand my purpose and how I can be of service, and what I need to incorporate into my being as I move forward through the world, and help me see the North Star that I'm trying to continually move toward. So I've gotten more and more involved in the psychedelic space as time has gone, because it's been such a gift to me to help me on my own journey come into alignment with myself.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am aware that our listeners really enjoy the personal stories and the personal connection to the work. It seems like most people who come to the psychedelic space, they tend to have a very intimate personal relationship. I don't know if you agree with that, Keith. They tend to, not always, but they tend to.
Of course. I mean, I think that really tends to be a prerequisite for choosing to get very involved, because these substances carry so much transformational potential in good and bad ways, and integrating and disintegrating ways. But the people who really find their way into being involved deeply, I think, tend to be the people who have had great personal transformation, or at least have witnessed other people in their lives having their transformations and have become curious.
Yeah, totally agree. So I'm not sure, I know we newly met, and I'm not sure if you were there at the Psychedelic Science Colorado. Were you there 2 years ago?
I wasn't, but planning to go next to the next one.
Yes, the next one's happening in next June, right? So am I. We might see you there.
Right.
So I was there interviewing really good, speakers that came, and also people just my favorite thing, my passion is really to interview people that are not really out there on stage, like they're really behind the scenes and doing a real authentic work. And of course, sometimes it helps the channel to invite the big names that are on stage, as you know. But I always tend to have the most amazing and enlightening conversations with people who really dedicated, but they don't really care about the stage, but they're really doing the work behind the scenes. And obviously, when I was there, as you know, there's, I think, 13,000 people ended up joining. And what really stood out for me is that we had scientists, indigenous people that trained with the indigenous teachings and practices. We had from shamanic, standpoint, we had medical, clinical, like we had everyone there, scientists. It seemed like it's a big, gathering with people that would never meet one another in any given time, because it was so mixed and diverse. And yet the common thread was, talking about psychedelics and how passionate they are. And sometimes when I interview people who have titles like medical or clinical spaces, they tend to ask me not to ask about their own personal experiences, just because, as you can imagine, there is still a lot of stigma. There is still a lot of, we have to navigate the space quite carefully. And I understand that. And yet they had the most amazing personal stories coming in. So it never, it never surprises me anymore. And so as I keep interviewing and meeting different people from different backgrounds, I always know there is this amazing journey that brought them to this space. So that's kind of gives me so much confidence, even when they say, oh, don't ask me this question, or don't ask me how, if I use psychedelics, or if I experienced any. So which is interesting, right? And I want to tie this with, you are from Portland, and it's one of the states that is now, maybe you can educate us on, in the world that was really relaxed very soon. They adopted quite a few therapeutic approaches with psychedelics, I believe, right? And is it true that now, especially you are the president of the Psychedelic Society Portland, I think you're the best person to tell us what is happening in your world in Portland when it comes to psychedelics?
Yeah, it's been quite a transformational time on the legal frontier, certainly. And so the brief rundown is that in 2020, the state chose to pass legislation that made a process for people to legally engage with psilocybin mushrooms. And so there's people are always asking me, or saying, oh, out in Oregon, you guys legalize mushrooms, huh? And I have to say, well, sort of, not exactly, but yes. But so it's a particular framework, and this requires having a licensed facilitator serve you mushrooms that were grown in a licensed grow facility that have been tested by a licensed lab, and you have to be served in a licensed facility. So it's a particular model, a particular way of interfacing with mushrooms. And however, there, as much restriction there is, which makes sense. This is a kind of new thing to be bringing into the modern legal Western framework. There's also, one of the great things about this legislation is that pretty much anybody 21 years or older can access what they call psilocybin services. And so you don't need to have a particular diagnosis, and it's not a medicalized model, it's not a therapeutic model. It's really, you're having someone sit for you in a safe environment. And so that's cool. And of course, there's been a lot of blowback in terms of the expense, because it's quite expensive. People are paying $1,000, $3,000, $4,000 to have a mushroom experience, where if you know what you're doing, you can grow more mushrooms than you would eat in a year for $150, and and do it on your own. But this creates a different pathway for people who might otherwise not be comfortable or know what they're doing, or know anyone who's involved in the psychedelic space, to be able to have this incredibly transformational and oftentimes mystical experience. So that's cool. And then that kind of started perhaps it's too soon to call it a cascade, but it led to Colorado choosing to create their own version of this legislation. And then Massachusetts was attempting to do something very similar. And just in this last election cycle, and the voters decided, no, this isn't what we want. So it's, I'm of many minds about it, because it creates a new access point for people who otherwise wouldn't know how to access these things or feel comfortable. And it creates a framework of safety and accountability. And it is ultimately a very particular way of taking psychedelics, and that can be very cost prohibitive for people. So I think it's a movement in the right direction. And like you're saying, the diversity of ways to experience these things is, I think, one of the great gifts of the psychedelic space, because people can, if they want, a doctor in a lab coat, if that's the only way that they'd feel comfortable taking mushrooms, that's a way you can do it. If doing it in a proper traditional ceremony is the only way you would be comfortable, that's a way you can do it. If you just want to go out with friends and have your experience, you can do that. And if you want to go through the state regulated model, you can do that. So having all of these different modalities kind of bloom in this great garden and allow people to choose, I think, is one of the beautiful things about this whole movement.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. So would you say that it's, just like all of us, we're all individual with different needs, different preferences. Some might like it, recreationally with friends, others looking for therapeutic use, as you know, as well. Now that's kind of like the frontier, right? At the moment, like the medical approach has been the most sort of force of really getting these to people. And I feel like, myself coming from a therapeutic background, I do see the potential, just because we're at the precipice of a point in the world where talk therapies and most modalities are not really useful anymore. And we do now know that psychedelics can intervene in a especially if it's created in the right way, the container and the facilitated in the right way. If it's done in the right way, I do believe that it can be a very powerful intervention for a lot of people that are suffering. But at the same time, like you said, that maybe, there's going to be so many different people wanting to engage with in different ways. That said, what would you say, it's all good. We can have experiences in different ways, choose to. What would you say from a harm reduction and sort of safety measures? What would you say? Is there any few pointers that you can maybe say that we should be careful when we're engaging with them, whatever the setting is or the set is?
Yeah, I think it's an important consideration and conversation to have because, like I alluded to earlier, as integrating as the psychedelic experience can be, it can be that disintegrating. And so it's important that as we're part of this movement that is working to bring psychedelics into the world in this new and ancient way at our current time in our current systems, it's imperative that we don't purely get caught in the lens of seeing and portraying things as wholly good or wholly beneficial, because there are real dangers. And there you hear stories and you see things of people having bad experiences that can run the gamut from a psychotic break to physical endangerment. And so it is very important that this is part of the conversation, especially because people who are psychedelically naive, if they're only hearing, oh, this is a miracle cure for my depression, I'm going to go and eat 5 grams of mushrooms, and not having any understanding of the importance of creating a safe container, it can and does sometimes lead to bad situations. So for me, I think that safety is paramount. And I don't personally ascribe to any particular mode of saying that it can only be done with a licensed therapist, or it should only be done with a shaman, or it should only be done with a medical doctor, or the plurality of ways to experience these things, like I was saying earlier, is important. And I think it's important to preserve that. Some of my best, most healing and transformative experiences have come from taking psychedelics and dancing. And, they're without there being a therapist or doctor or shaman in sight. However, it is a crucial consideration. How do we keep people safe? Because as this becomes more and more mainstreamed, there are going to be more and more adverse experiences. And I think that they're certainly more rare than the positive experiences, but they're real, and it's a reality of it. And we need to be talking about it. But fundamentally, knowing what you're getting into as much as possible. I always tell people, if you're going to do it with other people, have it be with people you trust implicitly, in a space where there's not going to be any surprises, and and do your research, know as much as you can what you're getting into. Of course, there's no actual preparation for the alien nature of the experience if you've never experienced anything like that. But safety is paramount, and it's also not everything. The reason that these things have such benefits, I think you could say, is because they carry such potential for transformation. And so if we're being so safe to the point where, you know, there's drug developers who are now creating psychedelics that take the trip aspect out of it, and hey, maybe that'll be great for people. But I think that we're dealing with these substances that are very, very mysterious and very, very foreign to our normal everyday experience. And so it's like the idea that the tree cannot grow its branches to heaven unless it's reached down to hell. This is of the nature of psychedelics.
Yeah, yeah. These are powerful guidance and pointers. Thank you so much for this, Keith. I want to kind of come back to the thread of one of the reasons that we have these conversations, of course, to inform and talk to a lot of people that are in the space and they have their own personal field experience, not just kind of research and reading, because some people are so passionate about sort of digging out like what happened in the 50s, what happened in the 60s, and when our elders kind of dabbling in this, I call them psychedelic elders, been dabbling in these substances, and and they sort of like write about it. But again, one of the things that I learned very quickly, unless we have our own field experience, even like trip sitting or helping people or being there for people when they're having these experiences, or we had our own personal experiences, it's very difficult to understand. And it's very difficult to relate when people talk about these ineffable, non-ordinary states and, altered states. So there was I can't remember where I read it. Not long ago, I read this article. In the West, the psychedelic education goes as far as a club scene or a festival scene. Do you know what I mean? Does it make sense?
Can you say more about what you mean?
Yeah, so the psychedelic education in the West, meaning because of the legalization, because of the control, it quickly went into underground, and at the only way we kind of relate and understand psychedelics is through recreational club use, club drug or festival drug, and that's it. There is no other like deep, in-depth understanding. And I was thinking, hold on a minute, like this is really bizarre, because it's interesting how it's all shut down. Because not long ago, again, I found this documentary, so many parts to it, and it was the Philosopher's Stone in Switzerland. I don't know if you've seen that one. They were celebrating Albert Hoffman's 100th birthday. And there was this global gathering, in-person global gathering happened. I can't remember in what year it was, but it's quite some time ago. And a lot of speakers. The vibe was very similar to Psychedelic Conference Colorado. So there's all different diverse elders talking about psychedelics. And I was listening to it. I was blown away how much they knew. How much they knew and how much they could talk about from a science, from a cultural, from a philosophical. It blew my mind. So actually, our education isn't just, stops at the club scene or the festival. There's more. It's just that it kind of got lost in conversation over the years. And I feel like we are here now almost reviving it somehow. Would you agree? Like this is the Renaissance, they say, but I feel like maybe not. Maybe like we're reviving because they already knew. They knew. It's not like we know better now. We're younger. We more modern. We have technology. It's not like that at all. I think they knew at the time.
Yeah, yeah. I like this idea that it's new and ancient at the same time.
Yeah.
It's this ancient way of being that I would speculate and say that every single person on earth, if you trace far enough back in their lineage, what their clan or what their people were doing were sitting around a fire and taking psychedelics. And, it doesn't matter where you're from. And so we all carry this embodied wisdom or this remembering. And one of the things about psychedelics is that I experience when I'm in that state and I feel like I'm gaining information, it really feels like I'm remembering things that I already knew and forgot. And I think this is crucially important in our era where we live in this hyper distracting world where everything is reaching out with a demand on our attention. And it becomes very difficult to remember what our hearts know. And so, this wisdom, this knowledge of the psychedelic experience and the import of it, this has been carried through humanity. And it's one of the reasons why, rightly in the psychedelic space, people are asking the indigenous wisdom keepers for help to figure out how to navigate integrating this ancient thing into this new landscape. And we but fundamentally, my stance is that we all carry this somewhere in our epigenetics or DNA or ancestral memory or felt understanding, because we all come from this place. And if you acknowledge the potential of Terence McKenna's idea that pre-human beings were interfacing with mushrooms, and that's what actually led us to develop language and the religious impulse and these things that make us human, which who knows, but intuitively feels true, then it runs even deeper than we can imagine. And so suppression can only last for so long before the pressure cooker creates so much pressure that it bursts out. And this is what's happening right now. So people can call it a renaissance. I think in some ways, it's really a reckoning where what has been suppressed for so long or gate kept or kept in these kind of more fringe areas of society is now bursting onto the scene in a way that's in our faces, where we can no longer deny the reality of it, because the psychedelic experience is the most mysterious thing that I've ever experienced. And I think most people would say that it's hugely mysterious. And so we can study it as scientists, and we can look at it as psychologists, and we can, do the potency testing and so on and so forth. But it goes so far beyond that what is this? Why do these things exist? What is the state that it's taking us into? And is there a cosmic reason that this is emerging at this time when we're immersed in a global crisis on many different fronts? It feels that way. Again, intuitively, it feels that way, that the psychedelics are re-emerging now because it is needed to help us remember and to see how we can navigate through this treacherous period of human history so that we can emerge on the other side into a world that is more beautiful and harmonious and true.
I love this. I love this. Reminds me of, it's a bit like the native wisdom. Every time the humanity loses their way, something like something bigger than us comes to aid. so to speak. I feel like, do you think psychedelics are cultivating us in this moment?
People say that, especially people who grow mushrooms
Yeah.
oftentimes will
Who's
say that.
cultivating you?
Yeah, exactly. So, and who's to say? I mean, if we want to get really metaphysical with it, you could look at the world as a planetary mind that all beings participate in. And so, in some sense, much the way like we're a body made up of many different cells and bacteria and all of these things are kind of like a swarm that make up this one entity. We are part of this bio psycho spiritual swarm that is the planet Earth. And, so who's to say that there isn't some part of the unconscious mind of the of the world that is pushing these mushrooms out of the ground, literally and metaphorically, so that we see them and pluck them and eat them and get tapped into that web of consciousness in which we all participate, so that we can remember and see how to navigate. And it's, again, if you look to that idea from Terence McKenna, it's like the his idea was that the pressures of the climate of the world at the time caused the arboreal proto hominids to move onto the plains and start experimenting with new foods. And there, the mushrooms were popping out of the dung of the ungulate animals. And this feels like that kind of same process happening in the contemporary world. The mushrooms are popping out of the dung of this sick society that we have created without anyone wanting it. And now it's time to take our medicine so that we can understand what we need to do from here.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Also a big fan of Terence McKenna. I'm sure a lot of people are. He's one of the elders, let's say, a psychedelic elder for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. So it sounds a bit like, so there's a few things that I was looking at, talking about the psychospiritual or the metaphysical aspects of humanity or human psyche. I came across recently, there was this concept of Moloch, meditations by, I forgot the name, I don't want to say it in case I say something wrong here, but I can always add it to show notes as well if people are interested, or you guys can comment. So the Moloch was a medieval figure who would come to devour humanity, and they would sacrifice humans for it to just not do that, obviously, to stop or to survive. And then there was a similar concepts was another one, Vetico, I think, is a Native American, or I'm not sure. Again, indigenous. Vetico is like a psychospiritual sickness of the soul or the mind of the human, where they kind of lose their way. And those are the times when mental sickness and psychosomatic, like physical pathology, increased in humans, and they kind of in that pressure cooker. Like, I love what you said. Do you know, I use the same term. It's interesting. It's so good to hear you say that. It's like the pressure cooker is definitely turned on and turning up and up more and more, getting intensified. So yeah, there is, there's so many in the myth or the mythology, there's lots of these metaphors of describing people and their sickness, like mental or psycho, let's call it psychospiritual. Do you think we are in that kind of time now again? And hence like you said, the psychedelics are coming stronger, like they're coming to help, to aid, perhaps. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the idea.
I do think so. And I think it's very nuanced because I don't want to, nor do I I like to, nor do I paint the picture that things are only dark and abysmal and getting worse, because as much darkness as we want to look for, we will find it. However, as much light and beauty and truth and love that we go looking for, we will find that as well. However, we are living at a time where the way I frame it is that the culture has a sickness. And by that, I'm talking about the global overculture that permeates everything, mediated by the internet age. The culture has a sickness. And so when I say we're sick, it's from a place of a diagnosis, not from a place of blaming, like you're sick. It's from a place of diagnosis where culture is this overlay that we have created over time as human beings, self-conscious, aware beings. We've created culture as an overlay upon raw nature. And the thing about culture is that it carries its own momentum, and because of that momentum, as we're creating things, it's already moving and carrying forward. And so cultural structures will outlive their usefulness. And also, we are moment by moment creating the culture through living. And so it's a student and a teacher, because it's learning from us through our actions, what we do moment by moment, and it's informing us. It's showing us the dark and beautiful mirrors of ourselves at every moment. And then what we pay attention to, we reinforce and we create. And so we're sort of caught in this feedback loop in which the culture has developed a sickness, and you can say that you can pick your timeline of how long that's been in existence. But to me, it's really due to this movement toward the pure scientific materialism mode that takes the animism and breath of life out of the human experience and replaces it with this sense of nihilism that everything's meaningless. And so when we look around the world and we see all of this manufactured throwaway plastic garbage, that's the mirror we're looking in. And so we see, oh, I must be throwaway, I must be plastic, I must be garbage. And it creates this sense of emptiness. And so people become alienated and they get sick. So I think that the psychedelics have the potential to serve as a kind of inoculation against the sickness, because it puts us in touch with our humanness and puts us in touch with the primacy of love, which to my mind is why the psychedelic experience is so healing. It's not that it's a cure for depression or a cure for PTSD, or it addresses these things, but that's not what it's doing. It's actually addressing the soul and helping put us back in touch with the reality that love is the most important thing. And so this is the way through, in my mind, is remembering, reclaiming our attention and our sovereignty, so that we're not just caught in this infinite scroll that's just reflecting all of the darkest aspects of ourselves, because that's what gets the most clicks and that's what advertisers want to see. And then it's just this sick feedback loop. Can we reclaim our sovereignty, our decision making over our own being, and reclaim our attention, put our attention on things that are meaningful, and then act from a real place of love, keeping love as the core and even sole focus in what we're doing. And if we can do this, then the Moloch, which is this kind of unconscious, you could say that's what the cultural sickness is. It's this unconscious, just self-perpetuating entity that pulls things downward. The Moloch can't survive in a world in which we are paying attention and acting from love. It can't survive.
Yeah. And you nailed it. That's exactly what Moloch is, the unconscious. It has its own, unconscious consciousness, I guess. It has its own, it's separate, it's dark, it's just, and also it's not aware. It's not aware. That's kind of where this is at. And if, hence why, when we talk about doing the self-work, there's always these conversations around individuation, self-actualization, self-awareness. Like if we can, work in a way that we can become self-aware and actualize the potential and our consciousness, I guess that's when the Moloch that's where we starve the Moloch, and that's where we starve the Vertigo in another language. So what I'm hearing from you, Keith, is that you're really honing into the existential, like the root, the ground zero of the existential piece, rather than, because the depression and wanting to treat the ADHD or wanting to treat, those are just the permeations of like what is, or manifestations of what is actually happening at the root level, right? So, and you're saying that psychedelics are not, because in the West, of course, we still have the pharmacological mindset perception. We think we need to create something in order to cure something. There is this loop that we find ourselves in. It's like taking paracetamol for headache. That's going to take care of the headache. But you're talking about, this is not that. This is the ground zero of what it makes us to be human and conscious. And those struggles and challenges are just the manifestations of things that we're not looking at or things that we're not aware of. And with psychedelics, whether we like it or not, it's interesting. Somebody might come in for a depression treatment, yet found themselves in the void of like waking up, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it, that these things are manifestations. And so they're, of course, very real. And the suffering that stems from them is very real. The great suffering of depression, of anxiety, of trauma, these things are very real. However, yes, they're not the full story, and the source runs much deeper. And it is this is, sometimes I will take some degree of issue with when people only refer to psychedelics as medicine, which I think it is medicine. It definitely is medicine. However, it's not only medicine. It's far beyond medicine. It's the access point to the great mystery. And it's the humility that is granted by accessing the great mystery that helps bring us back down to earth and center us. And it's the recognition of the deep and profound interconnection between every human being that dissolves or diffuses that stance of othering, which is a major issue in our world, is the othering and the finger pointing, because fundamentally the truth is that we are all brothers and sisters. And if we can spend our time on the same ship, infighting and shooting our cannons at each other, but we're on the same ship. And so if the ship gets dashed against the rocks and capsizes, we're all going with it. So can we lean into the deep recognition that each person is my brother, each person is my sister, and that I can give them my love and I can give myself my love, which many people are disconnected from the ability to do that, then we can imagine a beautiful world that we can navigate our way past the rocks and sail into the beautiful open ocean of. And I think it's really possible. I do hold great hope and faith in humanity right now, even though things look quite dire in a lot of ways. It's also the potential for getting beyond what's keeping us stuck and moving into a more true world, I think, is more ripe than ever, and that we really can and will make it through.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the optimism. Yeah. Thank you so much for this. As we're coming to the end of our conversation, Keith, I'd like to maybe touch on your work in the world, and maybe you can tell us about your coaching, your integration, your projects, some of those things, and maybe something like you want to share with us, something burning that you want to share, voice it. Yeah, would like to hear that.
Sure. Well, in terms of my work, the things that I do are to help steward this organization, Portland Psychedelic Society, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that exists to educate people around psychedelics and to build community with other psychedelic or psychedelic curious people. And there are a number of us working on this project, and it's really a beautiful thing. And then my coaching work is really, it's doing the psychospiritual work of helping people come into claiming their own sovereignty, trusting themselves, loving themselves, because everything stems from there. And then I also am a writer. I write essays and shorter pieces as well on these very matters that we've been talking about today. And I love speaking on them as well. And so I guess to your last question, what's burning in my heart is that now is the time for us to come together. It's the time for us to come together more strongly, more profoundly, more truly than ever, and to build the bridges between ideological camps, between people of different communities or identities, between people living in different cultures or countries, to really build those bridges from the heart, from a place of love, from a place of you are my other me, from a place of let's figure this out. Now is the time. We are teetering on the edge of a dozen or more existential risks to humanity. And we don't have time anymore to dance around and pretend it's not happening and fall prey to the endless cycle of distraction. And we don't have time anymore to rest in a place of finger pointing and blaming, which isn't to say that, each of us does need to take full responsibility for our lives. And that is the way we claim our sovereignty, is by taking responsibility for everything that's mine. But to get bogged down in infighting when we're on the same ship and we see where it can potentially head, this will destroy us. So we cannot do it. Your heart knows what you need. Your heart knows what is right, and your heart will guide you properly. I promise you. The heart is the center of knowing, and it it will help lead us to where we need to be. And the psychedelics are one modality. It's not the only modality, and it's not the end all be all. It's a finger pointing at the moon, but it's a potent, powerful finger. And so we should attend to it with our best mind and put our best people on it, because it can really help us navigate this time. And fundamentally, we are going to be okay. And can we all hold that faith together and then make that happen through our actions in the world? That's what I have to say.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This is so beautiful and so relevant to our times now. Thank you for the message. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for such a great conversation.
Of course. And it just reminded me of something, Keith. And that was, there's a quote. I do love quotes, by the way. So I'm a collector. So you might even see me online doing that. It reminded me of this quote. We are, you talk about the personal accountability and personal individual work that we need to put in. It reminds me of this quote. It says, we are in this individually, but together. It's a bit like that. Yeah. Doing this individually, but for the for the greater picture, for together, like to be together in it. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Where can our listeners find you? Where can they connect with you? If they are listening to this on audio, please tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, you can go to my website, keithgilmore.com, and that'll take you to all the other places you can find me.
Amazing. We'll have all the links and your contacts in the show notes as well. You guys, if you're listening to this on iTunes or any other audio platforms, you need to check out the YouTube, because we have the guests on video and you can connect with them, and you can also find a lot more different resources and links below the video. And thank you so much for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Please comment, share, drop anything you like, questions. You can connect with Keith, and also maybe anything that this conversation activated or brought something to your awareness. Share with us. Don't be shy. And we'll be seeing you on the next one. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Thanks, Keith. All the best.
Thank you.